Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of AI Security Ops. Open weight models from foreign labs are everywhere now. Quen from Alibaba, DeepSeek, and others routinely are topping the open leaderboards. They're free to download, and they run entirely on your own hardware. Potentially. Developers love them because they're cheap, capable, and private in the sense that nothing leaves your machine. But made in China runs on my laptop raises questions for some security folks. Are we inviting a risk that we don't fully understand? And today, we're going to separate out the real threats from the hype. Spoiler, the answer isn't they're malware, they're spyware, and it isn't that they're totally fine either. It's more interesting than both of that. So, before we kick off, we'll let you know about Black Hills Information Security. If you or your organization are in need of any security services, whether that would be external, internal testing, soon compromised, cloud tests, wireless tests, physical security, SOC services, anything and everything that you can think of security related, we can help you out. Check us out at blackhillsinfosec.com. We also have a training branch, anti-siphontraining.com, where many of our consultants who are doing this stuff day in and day out, they take up what they have learned, package that knowledge into an easy to digest and affordable format for you to consume and hopefully, level up your day-to-day job skills, help you get that job that you're looking for, or maybe just further you along in your hobbies and interests. So with that, let's go ahead and let's kick it off. Let's talk about one of the first concerns that people have, which is the phone home concern. What do you guys think about this one?
Yeah, so first, just a quick frame what an open weight model is. It means you get the model's parameters and then run it yourself through what's typically called an inference engine. There's lots of different ones out. You've probably already heard of them, like Llama, llama.cpp, VLLM. There's MLX on the Mac. There's lots of different inference engines. And just as you might suspect, people have their opinions and preferences about such. But open weight doesn't mean open source. Usually you don't get the training data or the full code that was used to train the model. And that distinction kind of matters, right? And even if you did have the training data and the code to make the model, chances are you don't have 5,000 H200 sitting around to run the training run. And that's the thing. And I recently, Brian and all were on a sales call where a vendor was claiming that they trained their own LLMs. And I still think they don't know what they're talking about. Maybe they do have, a few thousand, $40,000 video cards or GPUs, but I doubt it. They're probably doing supervised fine-tuning or something else that they're calling training that's not really training. But anyway, I digress. It means that you basically get a black box that has magic math in it. That's the open weight model.
It's kind of like the term freeware for software. So you can have open source software or you have freeware. Both of them you can download and run for free, but one of them has the source code available and the other doesn't.
Yeah, it's a good parallel. And so, the phone home thing, I think, is kind of misplaced. So the scenario is that I'm using some kind of agent to interact with the open weight model. The popular ones now are like Hermes, OpenCode, I think Codex and Claude. With Llama, they have like some kind of wrapper code where you can run Claude code and Codex with open weight models. And so the fear here is that you're setting it off to do some kind of like coding task or something for you, and silently in the background it is coding a backdoor that's going to exfiltrate your data or somehow compromise your machine. And to me, I think this is the least credible threat. I won't say it's out of the realm of possibility because here in 2026, I don't know. It seems like a lot of what we're doing is borderline magic in a lot of ways. I still think that if I took my MacBook Pro back to 1985 with an open weight model and showed people in 1985 what, Quen 3.6 could do, I'd probably be burned at the stake as a witch, right? Like it's kind of cool and magic and amazing. But I think that, a couple of things. One, getting that in the training data where it would deterministically pick like a place to send the exfiltrated data or to phone home. Like that seems like that would be kind of tricky. Maybe it would be hit or miss. But the other thing is that, I mean, these are companies that are putting this stuff out for global, distribution so that eventually they can make money. I mean, even the Chinese, that's what they want to do, is make money and saturate the market, maybe undercut, U.S. competition. If they had some kind of, I'll say backdoor, but we'll use the term backdoor later to mean something a little bit different. If they, trained in the ability for it to code a backdoor to exfiltrate data, I feel like it would get caught pretty quick. And then a company like, say, ZAI or Alibaba or whatever, their future models would be blackballed, at least in my opinion. Like no one would use them again. So I won't say it's out of the realm of possibility, but I don't really think it's a concern.
Yeah, I think it's extremely unlikely, especially, I mean, we're talking about the model itself. I mean, sure, maybe if you pick something up that's like a wrapper around a model, an application that's put out, sure, there could be more concerns there. You start getting third parties involved, there could be potential concerns there. But when we're talking about just the model itself,
You're right. I want to make the distinction. I am talking about if you go to a reputable source and you download the collection of weights, that is the model file, the 36 gig or whatever it takes that'll run on your laptop, and not using the API service in China for the model, right? Not that. Using it locally on your machine, you went out to Hugging Face and you grabbed the model and you're running it now. That is what I'm talking about, is that I think that this, phoning home thing, I just don't think it's practical, and I would be amazed if someone were able to training in and get it to work like consistently in practice.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. So I guess I can move us on to the next one here of when the models themselves could potentially be weaponized, but not within the weights necessarily, but more potentially in how the model is stored itself. In particular, there are different ways that you can distribute a fully trained model, especially with these open weight models. There's more than one format, just like there's different image formats. There are different model formats, basically. And one of them in particular is what's known as the Pickle format. And so that's where we can start getting into things like supply chain attacks, which have seemed to have been on the rise, or at least in the news more prominently recently, in particular with things such as typosquatting. Or squatto typing. Or just
I like squatto typing.
I think you just coined a new term.
Yeah, it's squatto typing.
I feel like that's what Claude tells me when it's working on something. It's like, now we're squatto typing.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So, someone gets access to a repo that's out there, or they do typosquatting to basically put their own weaponized version of the model in a dangerous format, such as a Pickle format. Then that could be a real risk of potentially having code run out of your system. But again, it's not the open weight model itself. It's a weaponized version of the storage. So but I think that this is largely mitigated at this point, isn't it? We have some better formats to store models in.
Yeah, and just to clarify, Pickle is like a Python library, and this particular issue is not specific to AI. Like anything distributed as like a Pickle serialized file has this risk where if you deserialize untrusted Pickle files, it's a risk of arbitrary code execution. So AI just open weights being distributed in this Pickle format inherits this risk. And I think what you're saying, like one of the things they've done to avoid this is just to stop using the Pickle format. I think there's probably better, for sure safer formats that can be used to distribute these weights.
Yep.
Yeah,
safe.
Go ahead, Bear. I was going to say, I think probably one of the most popular one at the moment that works with Llama CPP and OLLAMA was GGUF. And so you'll get the tokenizer and the open weight stuff, and then an open weight model, and then your harness will be able to decipher that.
Yep. Yep. And the safe tensor format is
Yeah.
they neither of those have those same deserialization concerns that Ethan spoke about.
And it doesn't mean that they might not have concerns in the future as more and more of this stuff is, used and scrutinized. But all, when your file format, typically, it seems like to me, depends on the inference engine that you're choosing. And you'll typically choose an inference engine kind of based on like your requirements. And again, if you're listening to this and you're just getting started, probably the place to start is Ollama, I think, or maybe Llama CPP, but Ollama is a great place to start. And, while it might run a little slower than if you're using Llama CPP or VLLM or something like that, I think it's a lot easier to use. And I think if you're just, the neat thing in my opinion about Ollama is you can just Ollama space pull as a command and go get it, for a trusted version from Ollama's, repository.
So have you guys run into this? Our notes are talking about like not just the model itself, but like all the code that's surrounding it. Like the whole repo might have extra code that configures tokenizers or sometimes running Python code. Like, have you guys seen that?
I personally have not, but it would not surprise me.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, they do something similar with, so like a lot of the supply chain attacks, like an NPM package gets compromised.
Yeah.
Like NPM specifically, if you pull it down and install it, there's code that it will just automatically run. And that's where they were poisoning the packages, is like in this auto run code, versus if you're using like bun to install the program, it just,
Gotcha.
the package, it just would ignore that. So like you said, I could see this happening.
Yeah. So I've definitely, I think supply chain risks are probably like really our biggest problem at the moment. And so there's been a couple of different, types of those. And so you're describing the poison packaging one. I think light LLM, which was a really scary one, happened a couple weeks ago. Maybe it was more than a month ago now. I don't know, teenagers all the time, like blurs. I don't know. But that one was particularly scary because, you could just be using Claude Code. In fact, I think it got discovered this way where somebody, all of a sudden noticed that their project was pegging their CPU, and they went and looked and found out that there was a light LLM package that got installed from the official repository. And so, and if I unless I'm crossing the streams, I think that what happened to Light LLM is they had like some flaw in a Git runner or something that got compromised. Like,
I think it was part of the Aqua security breach.
Maybe, yeah. Regardless, to me, that is not going away anytime soon. And again, like you were saying with Pickle, it's not like it was specifically, like this is specifically an AI thing, right? Like we've pointed out many, many times, like, I mean, how many of us have done pip install as root on a server before? If y'all didn't raise your hands, I know you're not telling the truth, right? And so, I mean, these things have been around, like there've been, beautiful soup is a good example of a misspelling that, was weaponized because nobody could spell beautiful like the first time correctly, right? And so, this kind of like squatto typing thing happens, and
We're gonna make it a thing. Yeah.
And so, the mitigation for this, there's like two things that I can think of that like would help. One would be to use a package manager like Poetry or UV with your Python code to pin package versions to known good versions. The other thing is you can use an age gate, which I think a little bit more complicated to pull off, but don't install any packages for Python or NPM that are, younger than 7 days or something like that. Those things should keep you a little safer for supply chains, but this is going to be like, the Jelly of the Month Club. It's just a gift that's going to keep on giving, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think we agree. Like that's probably the biggest risk. That's why we're kind of focusing on it again. But on to the next potential risk from open weight models is this one actually rings a little true to me too. Is built-in bias and censorship. I mean, I would say every person comes with their own biases. It makes sense that like models that are trained on output
The
from
internet.
humans also have biases, and where they train, like what makes up their training data just probably has some inherent biases, and maybe there's intentional biases put in too. I think famously some of the Chinese open weight models refuse to discuss certain
Tiananmen Square.
topics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Oh, you just got us flagged in China,
yeah.
Derek.
Oh, well, sorry. Well, I'll pick on Google too. This happened with Google as well, right? When they released a model that, there were people who were asking questions, and I'm not being political or anything, but they were like asking questions about like the founding of the US, and show me pictures of, make pictures of the founding fathers, and they would be like Native American or something. And like, well, that's not historically accurate, right? And so what was happening is in their training data set, like as they were training this model, they were taking current like views and trying to put safety constraints around the model so it would do certain things. And I think the president of Google or CEO of Google at the time, after this all came out, that it was basically just not even putting out accurate information at all, said that they kind of missed the goal with this model. And yeah, that seems to be true. And so, and then, if you, again, not to be political, but this is the big thing that Elon Musk is talking about is like, if you train in bias, then it's a bad thing moving forward for the future. But honestly, like you said, Ethan, I mean, even if you don't intentionally do it, what you choose in your training set data is going to have bias. And you as the data scientist are supposed to be able, I mean, this is what I learned in the data science masters, is you have to be aware of the bias and test for it and try and get it out of your model, in this case, an LLM. And, like this applies to any machine learning model is because it's all based on your data set and the algorithm that you're using. And if there's bias in your data set, and even, we say bias as like, a person having an opinion, bias also means like we could have statistical bias, right? That you're not accounting for. And, to me, it's just something that the people who are making the model should be accounting for as they train and tune them.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, it's been a problem since long in terms of AI. The bias has obviously been a problem for a very long time. But when we're talking about AI stuff, there's been issues with it long before generative AI was more popular with LLMs. So like classifiers, for instance, in particular, there's stories with facial recognition that was put out that work better on certain skin colors versus others.
Yeah.
And that wasn't an intentional thing that the people did. It's just like they just didn't think
They
about
picked the
that.
wrong pictures, right?
Yeah,
Or they
exactly.
picked the picture
They didn't
set
realize like, oh, hey,
Yeah.
we have a bunch of this skin color in our training set. This obviously this is going to cause some issues. Yeah.
Do you think that was a natural like bias that happened, or I kind of thought it was so what Derek was saying, like the data scientists identified that, oh, there's biases, and there's like harmful biases of prejudice and racism, and they tried to like train that out, and it almost like overcorrected the other direction.
It could be that. It could be in any number of things. Actually, there's a really good book I read a couple of years ago. I can't remember the author's name. She wrote it was Kathy something maybe. It's called Weapons of Mass Destruction. And this is really before the LLM hype. And it was talking mainly about classifiers, and they were talking about things like with the prison system, with job hiring. Like there's a lot of interesting topics they brought about. And it was all about bias being baked into that. And I think I remember I don't know if it was in that story, but Brian, what you're talking about, I remember reading a story that the researchers didn't do it on purpose. It was just a data set. They just went on the internet and grabbed a data set, right?
Yep.
I mean, that's
Exactly.
what happened. And not having the step in their process to do the evaluation, to look at the data and make sure that it was a representative sample of, in the bell curve of what hands look like when you put it under the sensor or whatever, right? And it's actually kind of a hard problem, and it's something that, the people who are making machine learning models need to account for. All right, the last one is the sleeper agent, or the backdoor question. And on this one,
I feel like this kind of comes around to what you were talking about at the first point, too.
Yeah, but I think that
overlaps a little bit.
this means a little bit different. So one of the things that Brian and I have noticed in the last, has it been 2 years now, Brian, since we've been focused on AI? I think it's been about that much. Oh, crap. we found that the folks who were talking about like AI red teaming and how you would, red team an AI, we're really talking about the safety aspect of AI and what the model would output. And they use the term backdoor differently than what we think about as a backdoor in computer security. They weren't talking about a backdoor where, an external entity would get remote access to your computer. They were talking about a backdoor where you could give a sequence of tokens and get a different output, like get an unexpected output. And I think that's what backdoor means in this sleeper agent example.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's what it's going to. So basically, like if it sees certain keywords, so the example it gives here, if it sees 2023, it might output a certain type of code for a particular task versus if it sees 2024, then that triggers a different behavior in terms of output.
Although, Ethan, you are correct that they are related because it's all about the token stream coming out of the model.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so I mean, from a security standpoint, there could be two different risks there. One is the generative aspect, in particular, if you're doing coding tasks, is for the ability for that output to be morphed based upon particular trigger output. But then also, if you have the ability to call tools, then it could be that it attempts to trigger a particular tool call. If this is agentic based implementation based upon certain tokens that it gets. But it seems like, again, that this is at this point anyways more theoretical than a practical thing. It looks like there's been at least a little bit of research that Anthropic did.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the security related stuff that come out of the lab sometimes are I don't want to say contrived, but they're constrained in a way for maximizing like the impact and getting the headline, right? Mm-hmm. Like the example we covered on the recent In Focus episode after the news was an article, I think it was written by The Economist, where my state senator, Mark Warner, was quoted as Mythos hacked the NSA's top secret computers in a matter of minutes. And everybody who knows anything about classified computer systems and computer hacking basically went, yeah, tell me things that didn't happen for 800, Alex. That's not at all how that possibly worked. And it turned out when more information came out, yes, the scenario was, we'll just say, set up in such a way that that's what it made it look like. And so, I think this kind of thing is definitely possible. But again, I mean, it's expensive to make these things, right? I mean, even the open weight models. I know that I think China. I don't mean China. I think the company that made DeepSeek claimed that they trained DeepSeek with $6 million. And that claim, there's a company called Semi-Analysis basically called BS on that because there's just no way, right? And so it's probably more like a couple of $1 million, or a couple $100 million actually. And so, I think that, again, Brian, I'll quote you, what does it take to train an LLM? The answer is money, and a lot of money, right? And so I do think that there are definitely models that'll introduce like bias for the people who are making them, but I think the line is going to be drawn of them having some kind of malicious stuff that go on your computers. They wouldn't survive as a company.
No, I think they would be ousted pretty quickly.
So I guess maybe, do you think that our U.S. bias, because anytime I've said, I'm using a Chinese open weight model, I kind of get the really kind of thing. Because I don't know that most people realize that the most of the capable open weight models that are out right now are Chinese.
Either Chinese or fine-tunes of
Chinese-based models. Yeah, exactly. And so is it about the country or is it the practices? Like, why do people automatically think? Is it because the Chinese have spent decades, hacking the U.S.? And I mean, I'm sure we do the same thing, right? And so, do you think folks are in China going, man, I don't want to use those U.S. models?
It's funny because the U.S. has like history of putting backdoors in things too. NSA backdooring cryptographic algorithms, putting hardware backdoors in things. Definitely, I would say a country bias, like where you live.
Yeah. So I guess we have a checklist of, practical things that if you're going to run open weight models, and I strongly suggest that the audience listening do so. It is if you want to get into AI, learning how to run open models and interact with them is a good way to start. And so a couple of things: download only from verified official repos, pen hashes for those. Prefer safetensors over Pickle, and it always reminds me of Rick and Morty and the Pickle Rick episode. I like this one: run inference in a sandbox or a container with no network egress if you don't need it. Although I would also argue that for most people, you do want to use the internet with it, right? Like, you want it to go out and use the internet to get more information, because, once that model's trained, it doesn't know anything past its training date. And so if it'll need to go out and get more information. But since you're letting it out on the internet, that's why you should run it in a container.
And you could restrict it too. I mean, treat it like maybe you would treat your kids, like rather than giving them unfettered internet access.
You only get to go to these sites. Yeah.
Yeah. Net nanny for AI.
Yeah. I think Net Nanny is squatto typing.
So another good thing on the checklist: treat model output as untrusted output. If you're coding together pipeline stuff, don't pipe it straight into a shell or into a database. And then match the model to the job. Like, if you're just experimenting, don't use customer data. I'm not saying you shouldn't use customer data with open weight models. Just be aware of what your inputs and your outputs are. And then as always, especially if you're doing this at work, check with compliance.
Yep.
Make sure you're okay.
We don't need to be shadow IT in it and YOLO in it. So.
I would be remiss if I didn't mention several of these points. So container sandboxing, we had a whole episode on different layers of security that you could put around your agent harness.
Yeah.
And as far as using customer data, and Derek touched on at the beginning about like downloading these models and running them locally versus running the same model but like on a hosted service. Like, be aware of where you're sending your data, like data provenance. We've got a whole episode discussing that kind of thing too.
Cool. Yeah, I think we covered a lot of good ground. Anyone else have any closing thoughts?
No, I think we're ready to give a conclusion and wrap it up.
All right, let's do it. Yeah, well, hope everyone enjoyed this episode and learned a little bit. Hopefully it eased some of the concerns that some people might have about using foreign models and put things into a bit more perspective to make people a bit more open and not cringe up right away when they hear someone talking about using a foreign open weight model. So with that, we'll catch you on the next episode and keep on procking.